Okay, so we're here today to talk about the observation that I came and did in your classroom yesterday morning. The goal that you had picked out to work on was to increase problem-solving accuracy to 75% for all students by the end of the year. And so I came in and you were working on problem solving and checking over morning work. And so what are some things that you think went well about the lesson?
Well, I think the kids are excited about the problem solving and with multiplication and division because that makes them feel, more that they're growing up. So they always seem to like that better than the adding and subtracting just because, they think it's cool to be able to multiply and divide. And they seem interested in the word problems. And most of them had the picture drawn correctly and had the number sentence correctly. So I thought that was, good.
Mm-hmm. All right. What are some things that you think maybe that you could work on, or is there anything you think that you would want to work on or either strengthen within that time?
Well, I see some of the children having a hard time deciding when to multiply and when to divide. They're getting confused, and they might have the number sentence even written out right, but then we'll start multiplying the answer instead of dividing the answer. So I could see that there's, it's a lot for them. There's a little bit of confusion in some of them. I think, we just need to practice. Those particular children need more practice, and I think it will come. I just think we need to work more on it and give them more problems and give them mixed more so they have to determine which way and just remember the steps that they have to do with whether it's multiplication or division.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Whenever I came in, the students, they were really engaged in solving the problems. I noticed that all the students were actively working out their problems in their journals. And then whenever you would talk and give directions or anything, they would look at you, and everyone was quiet and focused, not off task. So That was really good. They seemed engaged with it, and then they were all able to explain the meaning of a problem. So basically, in here, let me just say, I'm going over to looking at this checklist that I helped fill out, or that I filled out that we kind of picked out based on the Common Core standards for math and focusing on problem solving. And all the things were observed in the first part. It was explain the meaning of a problem and restate it in their own words. You had them writing it out, which is really good because that was one of the goals, is because by the end of the year they have to be able to write it out.
And I do think that's an area that is a weakness still. I think they're just starting to do that, and I think that's really hard for them to do, and I don't really think the majority of them have the explanation down yet. They'll have pieces of it, but they haven't really put it all together. Mm-hmm. So that's something that we will continue to work on.
Okay, and that might be good for like a goal of something that we can write down in a minute that will be coming up, letting you come up with some new goals and things to work on. They analyzed the given information to develop possible strategies for solving the problem. I saw multiple different strategies that the students were using. They weren't all using the same one, and they were drawing the problem. Some were using number sentences and things like that. So they used different strategies. They were able to identify and execute appropriate strategies to solve the problem. So they were able to identify what operation to use. And then on here it said check their answers using a different method and continually ask, does this make sense? And I did put a little note on there that you would do that, and then they would kind of reflect in their head. But I was just wondering, like, as third grade, like, should we be having the students do that too, like maybe converse? I don't know.
Yes.
But that's so I put a check there. I wasn't sure if that meant if the students were supposed to be doing that or if the teacher was supposed to be doing that.
I don't know.
But yeah. So
I think probably both. I think so, and sometimes I do have them stop and talk and say, talk with your partner and explain, what you think you're supposed to do and your understanding of what's going on. And then sometimes they'll ask questions, but So it's probably a combination.
Yeah, and that's good because then you're providing the modeling for them when they need it, but then they're still able to reflect, which probably helps them when they write their explanations too. So, and then you provided time for the students to solve the problems. And basically you had the other things that we had looked on for problem solving, reason abstractly and quantitatively. They connected to the quantity to numbers and symbols and created a logical representation. Recognize that a number represents a specific quantity. They were able to do that, contextualize and decontextualize within the process of solving a problem. They were able to provide appropriate representations of the problem. So all that was really good. Down here, and this is something for me too, but explain their thinking to others and respond to others' thinking. I just circled that because I know they do that in here in your class. Like you said, they were having the discussion.
Right.
But
one thing about the representations, sometimes when they're working by themselves and not necessarily when it's just like one problem that we're all working on, but maybe they're working on individual things, some of them will get confused with the commutative property, and they might have the number sentence right, but draw it out different, the opposite. And so we're working on that too, and just making sure that their drawing matches what they say. If it's 14 divided by 2, there's 2 groups with 7 in each group, not 7 with 2 in each group.
So just working on the representations. Yeah. Okay. Well, as far as what the checklist was for the this Common Core checklist, you pretty much had everything on there, and then and I should have checked this off too, participate in mathematical discussions involving questions such as how did you get that, why is that true. They did all of that, and so I didn't put checks by those, but those were there. The only thing that I just circled was the respond to the argument of others, and that's just as a whole something in my class too, that I need to work on. But I know you said they do that, though.
Sometimes we do. I probably don't do it enough just because of time factor, but I do think it's good for them sometimes to discuss between them. And right now, too, we just really have started really having them write it and explain it, and they're not really sure where they're going with it yet, so we need to get that a little more, I think, before they start really talking to each other. Because they don't really know. Like, they'll say, well, I took 14 divided by 2, but that doesn't explain why or how. You know, it just says what you did, but it doesn't explain why you did it, that sort of thing. So.
But no, that was great. Well, so as far as at this point, setting future goals is what you want to work on. Of course, since I'm your assisting math partner, we work together. Things that you would want to personally work on, or just as a whole instructionally, or is there anything that, like earlier I wrote down that you said working on writing out explanations, and then you said working on representations, but is that...
Yeah, I think those two things are big. The getting down their explanation is really hard for them. So in writing it out, I think that would be a big goal, and then just making sure the representations match, their number sentence. But most of them do. That's just a few that's getting confused. But I think as we get harder problems and two-step problems and things, it's going to be harder to remember, what to do when and being able to explain it.
How do you think that you want to try to work on them working on the writing out the explanation part?
Well, I want to include it more in our discussion when we're doing our word problem of the day and morning work. I want to make sure that we're having those discussions and I'm letting people share more, and that I'm requiring them to do that. I tell them to do it a lot of times, but they don't always follow through, so I need to follow through and make sure I go around and say, where's your explanation? And make sure you write your explanation, and allowing 2 or 3 of them every day to explain what they did until they start hearing other people modeling it correctly, besides just me saying it.
Okay. Well, and then... what about the work on representations? What do you think that you might do to help the students with that?
To me, it's just a few students, and I think just practice and reminding them that the second number generally represents the number of groups unless it says otherwise, and then it's how many in that quotient is how many's in that group. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it is different, but usually it will state, it's the way it's worded that it'll let you know that.
Okay.
So.
Well, what can I help you do with those things? So, you said, try with the writing it out with the explanations and like by including it more and more upon the day, telling them to follow and telling them and then following through with it, hearing it modeled correctly, and then for modeling, practice and reminding students to do it and putting the groups correctly and things like that. Is there anything that I can help you do with that or anything else that you can think of?
Well, if you have any great ideas about how to talk to them about explaining it, because to me it's never been really clear what they expect them to say or write. We started out one way, and then now we're being told kind of that's not what they want.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you have any, great ideas about how we could I wish there was kind of like a pattern we could say, okay, this is,
mm-hmm.
But I haven't really come up with that.
Kind of like how they did with the older grades did with the constructed responses, like how they had like a way that they would kind of like follow that
pattern.
Yeah,
so they would make sure that they got everything in there. And I'm not really, I guess I need to sit down and think about that. There's probably is. I haven't really thought about it. I wish we could come up with some kind of like pattern or way for them to remember, make sure you have this in there and this. Because we tell them, yeah, that's what you did, but now why did you do it? That's the part they usually leave off, and they look at you like they don't really understand. What do you mean that's what I did?
Yes. And I agree with that because that's what I feel like they're having trouble with.
Right.
I did not as far as, I'll look because that's what I can do while if you're thinking and working on these other things, then I can work on that and see if I can find some resources for us for that. And then I also gave you a little paper under the door. I don't know if you noticed it or not one day, but it was like from LearnZillion, and I didn't get a chance to tell you anything about it. But some of those questions, I don't know that I would give it as a test or anything, but even just to start out, having the students pair up and working on those, because a lot of those, that reminded me of those questions on the end of the year a little bit. And so looking at kind of how they're expected to do those constructed responses and how that they're supposed to manipulate it, and then like it would give them a problem and ask if they thought they were correct or why or why not, and that's kind of goes back to supporting the argument. So maybe I can look on there and see if LearnZillion gives any questions, that more questions that where even if it's just like every once in a while, we pair them up and let them work those out together, and then write an explanation, then maybe eventually do it on their own, and then I can come up with. See if I can find, like you said, like how 4th and 5th grade does the PAC or whatever it is, their answers, where they have like a little acronym or something that they can do. I totally know what you're talking about. So,
because I just don't feel like I don't know that I'm modeling it the best it could be modeled, because we don't really have anything. We're not being given anything that says here's a great way to do it, and we're just kind of doing what we think's right. But I just think if we had something like that, it would help the kids and help make it easier for them and us to make sure that they're doing it correctly. So.
Well, all right. Well, that sounds good. So I'll let you know on our next follow-up date, which should be within the next week.
Okay.
And I'll be working on those things and seeing if I can find more resources. And so
that'd be great.
All right. Well, that's it. And just real quick, so one more time, my checklist that I used was, I'll attach it in in my post. It's the Common Core mathematics checklist for implementing the Common Core standards. And the first few standards really focus on problem solving. So that's the checklist that I used. And then as we were talking, I did a planning and reflection handout. I know it says technology, but it can be used for instructional coaches. I used it for another class that I took. And so it's what the teacher plans to do and work on, and then how I can help support her in those things, what I can do until the next time that we meet. All right, thank you.